All right, so let's dive into the first one of these 5 primitive types. There's no real order here, but we're going to begin with number, or numbers. We work with numbers a lot in JavaScript and really any programming language out there. We store numbers, we manipulate numbers, we do math with them, something as simple as incrementing a number or decrementing. Like if you upvote something on Reddit, you're adding 1 to some number. If you downvote it, you're subtracting 1 from that number. These are super important fundamental operations. And in JavaScript, one of the primitive types is simply called number. So I wrote here that JavaScript has 1 number type. Some other languages actually have more than 1. They have a number type to represent whole numbers, usually called integers, and then a separate type to represent decimal numbers, called floating points or floats often. And the reason for that is that it takes a lot more memory to store a decimal. Let's say we're storing a whole number from 1 to 100. We need some amount of space in memory to do that. But suddenly if we're storing every possible decimal, now technically there's infinite numbers in between, but let's say out to 5 decimal points or 10 decimal points, that's a lot more space. So long story short, in some languages you have 2 different types for numbers. In JavaScript, we don't. We have 1 type. And that includes both positive numbers, negative numbers, whole, and decimal numbers. So we can begin very simply in our console. Remember, open it up from the dev tools. For me, it's Command-Option-J. And we can just type a number if we want and hit enter. JavaScript just tells us, yep, I know that thing. Here it is. I'm printing it back to you, right? It's evaluating this, but there's nothing really to evaluate. It's just the existence of 89. So we have, decimal numbers. We have negative numbers. These are all just considered numbers by JavaScript. Now there is a point where we do lose precision. So if I have some, really long decimal, you'll see eventually it goes from 1.999 and so on. Add 1 more 9, it's now just considered 2. So numbers get a certain amount of space in memory. They're not permitted just to take up an infinite amount of space. Well, infinite's the wrong term, but there's a hard limit. So simply typing numbers and hitting enter is not very exciting. What I'm going to show you next may not be that much more exciting, but it is something that we can do. We have some basic math operators that are built into JavaScript. So common things like addition and subtraction, multiplication, and division. So they use symbols that you're probably familiar with. They're pretty standard across programming languages and just, I guess, in the world. We can add numbers together, right? We can subtract them. I won't waste your time just showing you this, but let's do a little multiplication here. 3.5 times 2. If we divide something like 2 by 5, we'll get a decimal. If we have negative numbers, we can still do all this math with them. Now there is order of operations. The way I was taught this was PEMDAS, where we have parentheses, runs first, then we have exponents, then multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. So it goes from left to right. So if I have something like 3 plus 1 times 9, what happens first? The 1 times 9, that's the multiplication. It comes before addition. So we get 9 plus 3 rather than, what do we have? 4 times 9. Very different. So we get 12. We could change that using parentheses. So I could say I actually want this to run first. 3 plus 1, that gives us 4 times 9. We get 36. By the way, I'm recalling previously run lines in the console with the up arrow, so I can scroll through them with up and down. That can be useful. Now you may have noticed these grayed out lines in my slides. 2 forward slashes in a row create a JavaScript comment. We've seen comments in HTML and CSS. Same sort of concept in JavaScript. A comment in the console is pretty useless, right? Because this is not a file. This is not saved. This is purely a moment in time in our browser. When this window closes, this code is gone. But if I wanted to make a comment in here, I can. This is invalid JavaScript code. If I ran that without those parentheses, I'll get a lovely error message. It's red. It tells us reference error. Josh blah 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 is not defined. It doesn't know what that is. Okay, so comments mainly used in files, but in JavaScript, 2 forward slashes creates them. Next up, let's talk about 2 operators you may not be familiar with. You might, but you may not have seen them before. The first one is called modulo. It's also known as the remainder operator, and the character we use is the %sign. So the % here, or modulo, let's do some operation. How about 9% 2? We get 1. So here's how it works. It's called the remainder operator. We have 9 modulo, a lot of people say mod, 9 mod 2. 2 goes into 9 how many times? As a whole number. It goes in 4 times. And then what is the remainder left after that? Well, 4 times 2 is 8. So that's a remainder of 1, 9 minus 8. So if we had something slightly more complicated, how about 19 mod, and then, see, if I type a number here, it's going to show you the answer before I even hit enter. But what if I did 19 mod 4? What would the answer be? Well, how many times does 4 go into 19 as a whole number? Well, the closest multiple of 4 is going to be 16. So what is 19 minus 16? We get 3. So let's verify. There we go. So modulo is commonly used to determine if a number is even or odd. We could take any number and mod by 2. So any number, here we go, mod by 2, and that will tell us if it's even or odd. If we get 1, there's a remainder of 1 after trying to divide 2 into this number. That means it's odd. Now, if it's an even number, we'll get a remainder of 0. So any of these even numbers, there's an odd one, here's even. It doesn't matter how, it doesn't matter how size, it doesn't matter how large they are, what their size is. This is commonly used in JavaScript, and we'll come across it later on. Okay, now the next and final operator we'll see in this video is the exponent, or is it exponentiation? It's 2 multiplication signs, or 2 asterisks, 2 stars, and it's just going to take our first number and raise it to some power. So in this case, I'm doing 2 to the 4th power, and we get 16. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Right, so I can do things like 9 to the 9th power is going to be quite large. 9 cubed, 9 times 9 times 9. That's really all that there is to it. It'll raise that first number to the second number power. 2 to the 4th, 9 to the 3rd, and so on. All right. So we have our basic mathematical operators. These are used quite a bit. You don't need to be some math expert or anything like that. Of course, JavaScript is not just a glorified calculator, but it can be. So far, that's all it is to us. We've still got a lot more to learn, though. And just to recap the other parts we saw, negative numbers, decimals, whole numbers, it doesn't matter. It's just considered number in JavaScript. One generic number. We have some other operators like the modulo or remainder operator, the exponentiation operator with 2 stars, and we saw that JavaScript obeys the order of operations. We can use parentheses to alter that order, and I think that's pretty good for now. Okay,